Hey guys, this is another e-tutoring demonstration for biological basis of behavior. For this recording, we're going to talk about the structure of the nervous system. See if this wants to work. Okay. Okay, so the nervous system is split up into a bunch of different categories. What we divide them into, it's really all one big unit. To balance everything out. I know it's a little blurry, but this picture is a really good picture describing the different functions that you need, with the exception of the bottom left that says digestive tract. You don't have to know that. It's going to be more associated with another category that we're going to talk about after this slide. So the first division you should know, well, one that you've probably learned in psychology or in any neuroscience course you've ever taken, is your central nervous system. And your central nervous system is divided into the brain and the spinal cord. That is it. So your central nervous system consists of your brain and your spinal cord. It goes a lot longer than that, but that's as far as my mouse would let me go. Specifically, your spinal cord is going to receive sensory information from the environment with, let's see if I can highlight. So brain and CNS. So there's connections here in which sensory neurons are connected to the spinal cord, and then the spinal cord will then transmit those messages to the brain. And then your brain is going to actually do the processing of the sensory information that's needed. Your brain and spinal cord are also going to be responsible for executing voluntary motor responses. You will learn in most textbooks, it's chapter 8, the motor chapter, that you need your spinal cord and then neurons attached to the spinal cord called motor neurons or alpha motor neurons to initiate movement. Without this, you're unable to initiate any type of movement, with the exception of involuntary movements such as respiration or breathing. With that being said, the spinal cord is also responsible for involuntary movement, and then some portions of the brain are also responsible for involuntary movement. Involuntary movement, or automatic or autonomic movement, includes behaviors such as breathing, blinking, reflexive behaviors, things that you don't actively do or that you don't think about doing. It's something that your brain is going to initiate when the time is right and when it's needed. Heartbeat. Sorry, I'm sick. Heartbeat. So it's all going to be about what the text says, regulating homeostatic mechanisms. So anything that the body needs to function, the brain and spinal cord are going to take care of it. Here's the other portion of the central nervous system, the spinal cord. It's responsible for reflexive behaviors, and then it has pathways for sensory and motor functions. And then everything else that is not the brain and the spinal cord is part of the peripheral nervous system. So all the neurons associated with it goes a lot farther, but my mouse won't let me go. All the neurons in your periphery, all the neurons in your extremities and in your trunk. That does not include the spinal cord. Those are your peripheries, and these are going those are your peripheries, and those are going to, again, work with voluntary movement most of the time, sensory and motor information. Somatic meaning information from the body, autonomic meaning involuntary behaviors or movements that the nervous system is going to take care of that you don't have to worry about. Ganglia, all they are is these are located in your peripheral nervous system. All they do is they're going to receive sensory information, and they're going to relay it to the appropriate brain area. Ganglia are only located outside of the brain and spinal cord. When you are talking about nerve endings or neurons in the peripheral nervous system, and there's a whole group of them together, you're going to refer to them as ganglia. That only occurs in the peripheral nervous system. And again, they're going to relay or receive sensory information as well as motor information, and relay it to where it needs to go in the brain. Let's see how I switch. No. It's not gonna let me switch. Hang on. Okay, so this is just another really good chart or flow diagram that describes the difference between the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Like we said in the previous picture, the central nervous system is comprised of your brain and spinal cord, and its main function is, it's the brain, it's the control center, and your spinal cord is going to receive information and send it to the brain. Your peripheral nervous system is comprised of cranial and spinal nerves. It's basically everything that is not the brain and spinal cord, all the nerves in the periphery. And these are going to send information from the peripheral nervous system to your central nervous system, as well as the rest of the body. In terms of your peripheral nervous system, it can be divided into two main areas. You could be talking about sensory information or motor information in terms of afferent and efferent that's listed here. Afferent means it's going to go toward the brain. Efferent means it's going to go toward the body. So a good way to remember it is efferent is exiting the brain. Afferent is going toward the body, toward the brain, away from the body. So efferent, exiting the brain, sensory information is going to the brain, away from the body. So with that being said, sensory information has to do with, sensory information, it's going to go toward the brain, so that means that information needs to attach to the central nervous system with the cranial and spinal nerves, and then that can be transmitted to where it needs to go in the brain. In terms of motor, your brain is sending information to the peripheral nervous system, so your central nervous system is sending motor information to the peripheral nervous system. If you think about it, in order for us to initiate movement, we gotta think about it and then do it. So think about it occurs in the brain, and doing it occurs in the periphery. The opposite is true for sensory information. We feel something. In order to understand what we're feeling, we have to think about it in the brain. So we're feeling something on the outside, and then we want to understand about what's going on. So we're going to send it to the brain. In terms of peripheral nervous system, it can also be further divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is your fight or flight response, meaning that your body is going to stop using energy where it doesn't need to be used. For example, during digestion, and then it's going to increase metabolic activity where it's needed. So if you need to run, hence the fight or flight, your body's going to use the energy reserves that it has to increase your heart rate, to increase your breathing, to increase your sweating, so that you're able to run from the big gorilla that's running after you. In terms of parasympathetic is rest and digest. So this is where you're, instead of using energy, your body is going to conserve energy. Okay, so your parasympathetic is rest and digest. So what happens is you're going to do the exact opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. You're going to decrease blood flow, or at least have it at a normal, steady rate. You're going to decrease respirations. You're not going to sweat so much because there's no point in you sweating when you're eating. The whole point is to conserve energy. And it's going to keep the blood flow going in your digestive system. Compared to the sympathetic, it completely stops it. Your autonomic nervous system is concerned with involuntary movement versus your somatic nervous system. It's concerned with voluntary movement. Autonomic, meaning, well, it means self, but autonomic meaning it's going to do the functions without you having to worry about it, without you actually having to think about it. So that's what autonomic is. So, good example is your heart beating. If you had to think about every time about beating your heart constantly, we wouldn't be alive. So our brain's going to do that thinking for us on the side, so we don't have to worry about it on a higher cognitive level. Somatic nervous system is dealing with voluntary, so this is us thinking about the movements. For every step that I'm going to take, I'm going to think about it and then initiate it. Eventually you'll have to learn the flows associated with the somatic nervous system, what happens in the motor cortex, premotor cortex, and what's associated with them. But for the most part, I think I have one more slide. So this is going to come more into action potentials. But someone had asked me a question about it, so I thought I'd include it in here. So your your neurons are going to send messages in two forms. The first form is electrical, and that occurs only in the axon. And then the next message form is chemical, and that occurs solely in the terminal buttons and the synapse. This slide is particularly talking about the chemical messengers and what happens once the action potential reaches the terminal buttons. So once the action potential reaches the terminal buttons, your electrical message is converted into a chemical messenger in the form of neurotransmitters. Once those neurotransmitters are made, they're going to be stored in vesicles, and then they're going to chill in those vesicles until they're ready for release. When they are ready for release, they need basically a key to open the door for the vesicles to come out. For the neurotransmitters to come out. That key is an influx of calcium into the terminal buttons. That influx of calcium is the key to open the vesicle door, and then the vesicles are going to pour out all the neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft. Those neurotransmitters will then flow across the synapse and bind to different receptors depending on the function of the neurotransmitter. So that's a basic introduction of chemical messengers that someone asked about. That's pretty much it. It's understanding the basics of the nervous system, knowing the divisions of it, the central nervous system versus peripheral nervous system, and then understanding how the peripheral nervous system can further be subdivided, and how those two work together to balance the information around us.